Hey guys, welcome back here to today's episode of Advanced Bass Fishing. And today, guys, got a good video for y'all. We're going to be talking about the winter lake drawdown that happens on a lot of lakes across the country during the winter months. Anytime this happens, which is it's pretty predictable, pretty regular. This happens on most man-made lakes. The bass react to it in certain ways, and I want to give you guys some tips and advice on how to deal with it, because depending upon the weather patterns and the type of lake that you're fishing, this drawdown period can usually go from between, say, September into February, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, just depends. And bass react to it in a certain way. And I want to give you guys my experience in it, some things that work for me in today's episode here. Also, guys, just two things I want to remind you guys before we get started. We do have my Fish the Moment winter lake map breakdowns up on the fishthemoment.com website now. Great resources, guys, to get some good places for this winter, for drawdown fishing too on your favorite lake. I'll link that in the description of the video. And also, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, I'm doing jerkbait lessons now here on Table Rock Lake in Missouri and Stockton Lake. Just shoot me a private message on my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat, Professional Angler, for details. And also, guys, thank you everybody that's subscribed here to the channel and taking advantage of our Patreon and membership options there. Really appreciate that. Okay, now typical, this does not happen on a natural lake. This is something that's done on man-made reservoirs, and they do this for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes they've got to work on the dam. Sometimes there's repairs that need to be made, and other times they draw it down maybe to help some type of vegetation problems, or to help encourage growth of certain like that, or seeding. I know, like down at Grand Lake in Oklahoma, they used to draw the lake down so they could plant duckweed in it down there, just aquatic vegetation. But I think primarily one of the main reasons it's used is to prepare the lake, get the lake down low in preparation for the spring rains. So when those spring rains come in, they don't flood the lake out near as bad. But nevertheless, it's pretty common in a lot of lakes across the country. Now, the extent of the drawdown depends on how your lake is positioned and the characteristic of the lake. Say, for example, here in Missouri where I fish, Table Rock Lake and Bull Shoals and some of the White River lakes, sometimes, and maybe even if you're in Tennessee, like if you fish Lake Douglas or Lake Cumberland or something like that, sometimes they'll draw the lake down 10, 15, 20 feet on some of those lakes that don't have a lot of docks or something in it. And other times on a lake like Lake of the Ozarks or Grand Lake, if the winter drawdown occurs, it's usually only for like a 3 or 4 foot, maybe 5 foot drawdown at the most. A lot less, depending upon how the lake's set up. But nevertheless, fish are still impacted by the same, situation. Okay, now the biggest thing you need to remember, and this is sort of counterintuitive, it sort of goes against the whole thing about the water dropping. I have found in my own personal fishing, from fishing all around the country, that when you have a winter lake drawdown and they're actively drawing the lake down, the fish will actually move shallower. They don't move deeper, they move shallower. And I guess this probably is to take advantage of some feeding opportunities that exist in that shallower water that normally didn't exist in deeper water. Maybe it's more accessible to them. Maybe there's some variations in the cover that's more acceptable to them, or offers them a little bit more options. But I have just seen it in my own fishing, as a lot of times when that water starts to drop, the fish get shallow. And they also get more aggressive. And it seems like to me they also prefer some type of a moving lure. So what I have seen, if I'm in the middle of a hard drawdown, and especially if the lake does not have much cover other than rock or grass or rock or gravel or clay or something like that, they just use whatever cover's available. It could be a rock transition. It could be different type of rocky banks. It can be nothing looking banks, and baits that you can cover a lot of water in, like crankbaits and spinner baits and chatterbaits and topwaters, swim baits, jerk baits. Those are normally the best lures for it. When you're dealing with lower water, and especially if you're dealing with a low water situation where you don't have specific shallow water targets like docks or lay down trees to throw at, the fish really roam and they spread out a lot. And that's why you have to cover water. And that's why those moving type lures are probably the best, baits you can have for it. Now, there's two baits that I really, really like in the wintertime on a hard drawdown. Number one is a crankbait, and the crankbait that I use is usually like some type of a wiggle wart or rock crawler. I find that when you have water temperatures in the 40s or 50s and you have low water, that those baits work really good. So I'll just cover water, fish rocky banks, rock transition with them, that type of a thing. And the second one is a jerkbait. Jerkbait is a great lure for wintertime drawdown because you can target a lot of different depth zones in it. You can fish shallow with a jerkbait. You can fish deeper if it's cleaner, if the fish are a little bit deeper off of those transition areas. But those are my two primary weapons. In that time of year, I don't slow down a whole lot with a slow bait, with the exception of like a jig. Sometimes I'll use a finesse jig, like on steeper banks, like bluff banks or very steep rocky banks, because on a drawdown situation on a very steep bank with water that's deep, in close proximity, those fish will tend to move a little bit more vertical on those steep banks. But if you're on a flatter bank, say you're on a 45-degree angle, rocky bank or less, a lot of times those fish will move more horizontal with it. And that's why the moving baits like the crankbaits and the spinner baits can be a little bit different or a little bit better. Okay, a couple different things you need to remember here is you don't have to have this, but it seems like it helps to me to have your areas that you're the rocky bank areas. They need to be somewhat close to deeper water. It doesn't have to be immediately. It doesn't mean that it has to be a rocky bank that drops off immediately into deeper water. But I like to have deeper water within like 50 to 100 yards of that particular area. It seems like that attracts a lot more fish. And another thing that I really pay close attention to is on a drawdown situation like that, you have a lot of cover that begins to show itself that you don't normally have. You might have a little rock pile, you might have a little rock outcropping, a little rock indentation. Something's going to be a little bit different. Sometimes you'll see like a 55-gallon drum is exposed, or maybe there'll be an old picnic table or something like that. Any type of irregular feature is going to be a key area during a drawdown situation. Now, some of the areas that can be really good is if you have stationary, visible, hard targets, specifically like boat docks or like lay down trees that are on steeper banks. If you have a boat dock, especially docks that are floating docks where they can, adjust the level of it and push them out deeper as the water goes down, sometimes these can be really good places to fish in a drawdown because they're a stable, consistent piece of cover for the fish. But it's the same thing on a dock. One of the things that I've noticed about a drawdown on a boat dock is the fish will use the shallowest part of the dock. One of my favorite techniques for fishing a winter drawdown is if you have water temperatures that are in the 50s, which a lot of lakes do in the wintertime. A lot of lakes don't get into the 40s. But if you have a lake that has a drawdown in the winter and the water temperature is still in the 50s, try fishing the shallowest part of the dock with a jig. I have caught them in like a foot of water, in 50-degree water where, say for example, the area up there by like where the walkway on the dock is, it may only be 2 foot deep there, super, super shallow. But those fish will like to hang up underneath those floats on that shallow part of the dock. And I don't care if it's clear or dirty. It's like even in clear water, I've caught some big ones like on lakes like at Lake Lanier in Georgia, where the inside part of the dock was maybe part of it was even sitting on the mud, and you've got like a foot or two of water 50 degrees, gin clear water, and you pitch that jig in there and a big one will dart out from underneath that dock and get it. That's a little, offshoot you might want to remember when you're fishing there. But overall, I like fishing the drawdown because I think it concentrates the bass more. It puts them more on the obvious targets, and it puts them on rocky banks. And I love to fish rocky banks, guys. One of my favorite ways to bass fish is just put on a crankbait or a jerkbait or spinner bait and just cover water down a rocky bank because you're always fishing something fresh. You're always moving. It's not boring, and it's just a really good way to catch them in the wintertime. So anyway, hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.